to the Built on Air podcast, the variety show for all things Airtable. Each episode, we cover 4 different segments. It's always fresh and different and lots of fun while you get the insider info on all things Airtable. Our hosts and guests are some of the most senior experts in the Airtable community. Join us live each week on our YouTube channel every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern and join our active community at BuiltOnAir.com/join. Before we begin, a word from our sponsor, OnToAir.com. Any business running on Airtable gets the value that Airtable has, but also needs a few more functions to complete their operations. That's where OnToAir comes in. It's a suite of tools for any business running on Airtable to maximize your operations efficiencies and automations. One customer, John, states that OnToAir enables his business to function properly without having to think about building their own software, and that is pretty invaluable. The OnToAir Airtable apps are amazing, and we use them often and are very happy with the results. So join John and hundreds more customers and take your Airtable to the next level with OnToAir. Sign up today with promo code BuiltOnAir for a 10% discount. Check them out at OnToAir.com. And now let's check out today's episode and see what we built on air. Welcome back to the Built on Air podcast, season 15, episode 2. Good to be with you. We've got a full house. We've got our special guest, Scott Rose, joining us. Welcome back, Scott.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Always good to have Scott with us. And as always, Camille and Alli, welcome.
Yay, hello.
Good to have you. Very good. Let's go through what we're going to be talking about today. We always do 4 different segments to keep you up to date on what's going on in the Airtable world, make you a better Airtable user. We always start with our round the bases to see what people are talking about and any new updates. Then we'll do a spotlight on OnToAir, our primary sponsor. And then Scott will be showing us how to use make.com for importing and exporting of your data as CSV data. And then Camille will be going through some new fun changes with interfaces and detail pages. And then a quick shout out to our community and how you can join. And then finally, Scott will do a spotlight on an app and his first impressions in using NoLoco. Okay, with that, around the bases, couple interesting things. We'll start with this one. We'll give a teaser because this is what Camille's going to walk us through, the changes and whatnot. But there was a big change with the interfaces and how they deal with stuff. So maybe save your tomatoes for when we get into that segment with Camille. If you're not a fan of the changes, I know there was a lot of pushback, but any high level stuff before we get into the weeds with Camille?
I'll give just an overview of some of the things. So you can see in this thread and its companion thread in the old forums is that I didn't know I had access to it quite yet. I didn't see them yet. So far, this only applies to brand new detail pages, not detail pages that were already created before circa last Thursday. It applies to existing interfaces, meaning if you already were working on an interface and you create a new detail page in that existing interface, it still affects you. I think that the general preference would have been only affecting brand new interfaces and their detail pages, but that's not the case. 2, all new detail pages, both side sheet and full screen, are section based. And when you create a brand new detail page, 10 fields are added into a section, but the section is hidden. And so if you scroll back up a little bit, what's confusing a lot of people is that the default layout for a section is column when people want row most of the time. And row is still not perfect for a couple of different reasons, which I'll get into later. But you actually don't see the option to change it into row unless you create another section, and then the 10 fields that were there by default are going to be labeled as section 1. You then click section 1, change it from column to row. I say that because I pointed out before, and like everyone is still confused. So that is very clearly a thing that Airtable needs to adjust. It has, in my opinion, several benefits and several, things that need to be adjusted. The things that I think personally that need to be adjusted seem like things that can be fixed relatively easily. I put that in quotes because I'm not an Airtable engineer, but as a software developer, I can see how I would solve the problem based on the infrastructure that they have in place. So I'll give my full sort of overview of what's changed. Some good, some bad. Some of the bad is very bad. Some of the good is, it's nice. So we'll get into that. A lot of people are upset for various reasons. So this is probably the big one of the month, if you will. Every so often we get a change in Airtable that is,
It's
contempt all around.
It's the tornado of the month.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want, they do have a support document. Did they announce this? I didn't actually see an official announcement of it.
I did not see an announcement. Sometimes what happens is Airtable will drop some sort of major update without much warning, and then like a week or two they'll have like an AMA or something that will give a deep dive into it once people have time to sort of play around with it themselves and then come somewhat informed with questions. I think it's sort of general sentiment that we would prefer, hey, in July we're going to do a major update to detail pages. If you were working on creating interfaces, half of them are going to look old and half of them are going to look new. That would have been nice to know ahead of time. That's one of the complaints people have that's not really specific to this update. It's sort of a pattern on Airtable's behalf.
Yeah. So shout out to Sleepy Joe on the Airtable forums, air.tableforums.com. This is the first where I saw it published. Maybe there's a earlier one out there.
I saw Ben Bailey on our BuiltOnAir Slack community. He posted a smaller screenshot showing the difference between column and row as toggle settings, which is why this screenshot confused me, because I was like, I thought you could put it in a row. You can, it's just you don't see that option until you create your second section, which to me is flawed user experience design.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. All right, we'll get more into detail on this. So if you're concerned about this, Camille's gonna help put you a little at ease of what you can do with these new changes.
I don't know if I will. I'll help, but you might still be mad. It depends on what you personally prioritize.
That's fair.
Dan, do you think there should be a new segment every week called the Tornado of the Month?
The Tornado of the Month.
Sometimes it's not every month. Sometimes it is, every 2 or 3 months. But then it's like, we've changed the pricing structure, which is like massive.
Right.
Yeah. Well, speaking of tornadoes and changes, another undocumented one. So I linked to the original thread that was back in April, I believe, when they announced the new home screen back in March. Actually, I guess maybe even before then. And everybody's saying, I want to switch back to the old home screen. Well, last week you likely got an email saying that now everybody is forced into the new home screen. And not a lot of happy people. A few happy people. Camille's one of the happy ones. Scott's one of the less happy
I'm neutral.
ones.
My boss here, she doesn't like the new homepage either, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time on the old homepage, and I don't spend a whole lot of time on the new homepage. It just does not affect me all that often, but it is another fairly unpopular Airtable change.
I find it terrible in so many ways. It's such a strange user experience. Like, some pages have different options. Like, if you're looking at your workspace list versus your entire list, the ways to sort them are completely different, which makes no sense to me. I had an experience the other day where I went to go duplicate a base from the home screen, and it just disappeared. It was just gone. I had to search for it to find it.
Wow.
It doesn't. I hate it. I feel awful saying that, but I really, 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 strongly
You don't have to feel awful about it. There's plenty of people who don't like it. I just happen to be the only one who doesn't care.
I would agree. I hate it. I would say this is maybe one of the top things I hate about what they've done. It was an experience that worked so incredibly well before. I've never heard anybody complain about the old home screen.
No.
And one of the key things is that you can move things around in the old home screen where you wanted them. So you could figure out your own priority for what, it's like when you sit down at your Mac, and like your icons in the dock are at the bottom of your screen. They're aligned in the order that you want because it makes sense to you. Now the new home screen, you can only sort it by like recently used. Like just because I went into an app, into a base once, it doesn't actually mean that that's now my most important base that I need at the top at all times.
Right.
And I know that they say that, you can work around that now by starring different bases, and now they'll show up in your favorites list in the side.
But that favorites list is at the bottom of all the rest of the lists. So it doesn't actually resort anything. You still have to click another time to get to that list. It just doesn't. It's mind-boggling.
It's so confusing. You're always lost. And like I know that Camille says she doesn't spend too much time on the home screen. The problem is like for someone like me, I'm always on the home screen because I'm working with so many clients and I'm always bouncing between different workspaces. And now it's I'm always lost. I'm always lost.
Yep.
Yeah.
This was the tornado from March.
Yeah. This is the aftershock.
Yeah, I had switched back to the old one for so long that I kind of hadn't spent any time exploring the new one, and now I'm forced to, and I'm just endlessly frustrated.
Yeah, I was on the old home screen until, what was it, like 5 days ago when they forced us?
Yeah, sometime last week, I think.
Yeah. It's disappointing. I think it does come back to the patterns and the habits that Camille was talking about. It's like, it feels like they're not really listening to feedback, which is sort of the ongoing complaint for years.
Yeah, I'll in my breakdown of the new detail pages, I'll point out where it's evident that they've listened to something, and it feels evident that they've kind of missed the mark on perhaps what we were saying, because you can see bits of both, but that's for later.
Yeah. Yeah, this is interesting. Just looking at the feedback, this isn't just the regular people voicing their disdain for updates, but like this Alexander never has submitted complaints until this change.
Yeah, and the other terrible thing is the separation between interfaces and bases is super confusing. They look exactly the same. It does say interface or base in very small lettering underneath it, but I have clients that are completely confused now because they see them in the same list and they're like, which one is what I created? And it's it's if you don't know what you're looking at, it makes it even more confusing.
Yeah.
You can filter by base or interface or both, but I mean, I wouldn't want to say most people. I think a lot of people tend to name their main interface the same thing they named their base, and that's confusing. I feel like they should be visually distinct in some way. Separate them with a line or something. I don't know. There's some things you could do to make that division more clear.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll see. Hopefully the pushback enforces some changes and
see. See, Dan, it's exactly what you said about the pushback. This is what frustrates me the most about working with Airtable is that this is such a pattern. They roll something out, and based on the amount of pushback, then they finally do something about it. But it almost feels like it has to reach a certain threshold of complaints. Like once they get 120 complaints on the forum about it, then they make a change. It's very bizarre.
Yeah, for sure.
I like Brittany's comment there. That's really vicious, and I agree with it. I agree with everything she says there.
Yeah, it's the worst UI update I think I've ever seen from any product or service.
I've seen worse.
I love what she says here. Whoever designed this and whoever approved it should no longer be in their current roles because they're clearly awful at their jobs. What's that?
Fairly
is this a
scathing,
pseudo
yeah.
account of yours?
Yeah, this is your ghost account.
This is my ghost account. It says
If you
I've been using
rearrange the letters in Brittany Felix faceplate, no Scott Rose.
rearrange it. It's an anagram. Just rearrange it
Yeah.
to Scott Rose. It says I've been using Airtable since 2016, I think, and this has me seriously considering moving everything to a different platform. That's an anchor there.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in Brittany's mouth. I think it might be more so the lack of like communication for this launch and like again the pattern of behavior. I don't know if it's like literally the new design of the homepage and more so like a pattern or what they see as a pattern in terms of like they're making decisions, generally speaking, that many people feel are poor UI or poor user experience design. This is probably the straw that broke the camel's back, I think, in this instance.
Yeah. I mean, just give us the ability to drag and drop them like we used to, and I think that'll take us 50% of the way to fixing
There's
it.
there's always a happy medium for moving from some previous UI to some new UI. There's going to be things people liked about the old way and things they didn't like about the old way, and not necessarily every update is going to be like better in all regards. There's always some things that you don't have to necessarily throw everything away, I think is probably the point for both the homepage and for the new interface detail pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. All right, let's move on. One more frustration from changes. Another undocumented change. I wasn't aware of this till a friend of the show, Kavan, pointed this out. Apparently, they changed the URL format for shared links.
Oh, wow. What? That's huge.
So, yeah. If the share URL of your form, so I guess they used to have the app ID as part of the share.
No, it's the other way around.
Oh, other way around.
It didn't have the app ID, and now it does include it. And what Kavan is saying is to use. She has an app in the marketplace that pre-fills like form fields with whatever you wanted. It's a very intuitive extension that we all certainly recommend people use. Completely free. Everyone should use it. That sort of relies on pre-filling a specific pattern of URL that she was expecting, which is how shared links have been for some number of years. And then they have quietly changed how share links look. Now, old share links without the base ID still work at this time. But in order to use her extension, you do have to take that app ID out until or if the extension is updated to work either way. So that's what she's sort of announcing here. And like, personally, I'm more mad about this update than the previous two we've discussed for very specific reasons. But, I will leave that for another day. We can't have too many tornadoes at once.
This is Tornado Alli.
Hi.
Yeah. Okay. So it looks like so her extension had the app ID in it, and so or it didn't.
It didn't. So what happens now when you get a shared link? You would. She's basically asking you to take that out when you paste it into her app. I believe she might be working on updating it so that it, expects it now because that's the new format. However, until that change is like approved by Airtable for it to sort of go live in the marketplace, if you will, it's sort of a manual thing that users are going to have to do, which is somewhat inconvenient.
So if you go to if you create a form, okay, yeah, I see. So if you go to a new form view or just to a form view and then click on the share form button, that link that it gives you now automatically contains the base ID / app ID. Okay, yeah, that's an interesting.
Is that for forms or for sharing a base? Or
probably for everything.
I believe it's both. I could be wrong, but it stands to reason that it would be both. It should be either both or neither. having two different methodologies.
So now form URLs are a lot longer with the app ID in them.
Yeah.
And so does this break all old share links that people have sent out?
No, they still work. We don't know if they're always going to work, but at this time they still work.
I see.
But the one that they're giving you, and they did something similar with just the main structure of like bases. They adjusted that, but the old formats still work.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. So I think maybe you could just kind of standardizing that.
This is kind of interesting because this is almost the opposite of what somebody in the Slack community found out, which is that when you make calls through the API for a record ID, you actually don't even need the app ID anymore, or you never needed it at all. But it's always good practice to have it in there, though.
You do need the base ID. You don't need the table ID when querying for a specific record.
Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying. Oh, okay, so that's not really analogous.
It's a similar concept in that, like, while it is preferential that you include as much information as you can to be specific, previously you didn't need the base ID for the share ID because it knows. Now you still don't need it, but it is included. So they are, to Dan's point, I believe they're just standardizing it. Like, give me all the information that there is about this thing, even if I only need one piece of it.
Yeah. It makes sense. It makes sense to be as specific as possible. A good best practice.
Yeah. Very good. Last one from the BuiltOnAir community. An interesting discussion from Hannah. What do you perceive to be the best way to set up users in a base? Add a user field to each table, or add a users table with the user field that then uses a linked record and look up for every other table? What's your go-to?
The latter, for sure.
The latter for me too.
There's so many more advantages to doing that.
There are. I have a build right now that uses a combination where, think of having like a project and then another table that's like set of tasks, and then a table below that's tasks. At the task level, those are assigned to the people record, but all previous levels up are just using the user field, just copying it down, because I don't need that level of detail at the higher levels. It's just easier from like an automation and data point perspective, because it's like less mutable at those stages. But where it matters, I think most people tend to gravitate towards having a users table, because you don't just want someone's name and email. A lot of times you also want to know what role they are in, what department are they in, who's their manager, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
absolutely. That allows you to have, especially if you're using, a third-party app like Softer or Stacker, then that users table comes in really handy for internal tools and external, I suppose. Definitely.
Now this will be, now Airtable might have a different answer, because they probably want you using the user table, because that would inherently encourage more users signing in, although you can have non-paying users in those fields, or non-account users, right? You can have just an email, but obviously that will drive more. Now, what I want to know is, now, when is the verified data going to come out? Because this would be a very common use case for the verified data of having a user table that can get shared across spaces.
They say it's available now, but I have yet to be able to access it.
I can access it, but only in my enterprise environment. So I don't know if it's like limited to a specific, either, I don't know if it's a closed beta available or it's like available. But we have public data sets that we use.
Yeah.
The support page says it's available, but I don't see it as something that's available.
Do you have access to an admin panel?
I
don't
do.
know.
Yeah, actually.
That's all I got. That's where my troubleshooting ends.
It could be, yeah. Yeah, it could be that. Well, we should definitely.
I feel like that should be getting rolled out here soon. It was announced a few months ago. All right, that concludes the round the bases and all the tornadoes that came through this week. Keep you fresh on your toes. So let's move on to OnToAir. OnToAir.com is a toolkit to run your business on Airtable. If your business relies on Airtable, then you should check out OnToAir. We're continuing our highlights on celebrating Backup Awareness Month from last month. We're celebrating it in July since we were off last month. But as part of Backup Awareness, spotlight on one of our customers, LKF Marketing, and how they use backups for their bases to ensure their clients' data is safe. So really good case study and how they use backups and the benefits that they get from using OnToAir backups. So celebrate with us Backup Awareness Month. Make sure you're backing up your data and check out ontoair.com/backups for how that can help in your business. Okay, let's move on. Scott is going to share your screen with us, and we're going to be talking about CSV, importing and exporting, and using make.com for that.
Great.
You ready?
Yes. Share my screen here. Oops. All right.
Okay, you're on.
All right, awesome. So one thing that I noticed has come up actually a couple of times in the last month in the variety of Airtable forums that are out there is people have been requesting ways to automatically get CSV files into and out of Airtable. And we know that you can manually download a CSV file from any view. You could just go here and go to download CSV. And you can also manually import CSV files through a variety of different ways. One of my favorite ways, because it's the most powerful way to do it in Airtable, is to use the CSV extension that Airtable built. It lets you merge data as you're importing it. Here it is right here, the CSV import extension. And it lets you do a whole bunch of cool things. But both of those ways are manual. And a lot of people have been asking for an automated way to get CSV files into and out of Airtable. And so my favorite go-to for all sorts of complex things is using make.com. And I wanted to show how absolutely simple it is to set up automated imports and exports with Airtable using make.com. And one of the reasons that it's so simple using make.com is because if I go to make.com here and I go to their list of apps and services, they actually have a whole bunch of modules, and they're kind of hard to find because they're not actually in any sort of a category here on the left. But there's a whole bunch of modules that make.com has created that do all sorts of things. And one of the things that they created themselves is their own custom CSV modules. By the way, there's a bunch of other cool ones as well that they've created. Like they've built in their own currency converter. If you type the word currency, they've done their own phone number formatting app. And it's kind of hard to know all these little things because you got to search for these generic words. They're not actually apps on the web. They're just apps that Make created. So anyways, I'm going to show you how absolutely simple it is to use Make's CSV functionality. So basically, I created this table here. Let's pretend that we have an event coming up, and we're keeping track of people who are coming to the event, both attendees and vendors. So vendors pay money for booths that they're going to be selling their products at, and then attendees will be paying a cost to attend the conference. And what I have here is a CSV file of contacts. And now the reason, by the way, that you might have a CSV file for this is because a lot of people have other systems and they're not able, maybe these other systems don't have an API, so you can't actually communicate in real time with Airtable. Or maybe, they're dealing with other organizations where they don't have access to that organization's app, but that other organization is doing like a daily export for them in CSV format. So there's a whole bunch of reasons that people might be dealing with CSV files on a regular basis. So in this example, we're sort of assuming that there was some external system, and once a day, let's say, the external system creates a CSV file for them of their new contacts or maybe even updated contacts. So this is what the CSV file would look like. We've got the contact name, the company, the contact type. And then for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to assume that every contact has a unique ID number. So you can see the unique ID numbers right here. But if you don't have a unique ID number, you could find something else to use as a unique identifier for the person, like their email address, possibly their full name, although that can be a little risky. That might not always be completely unique, depending how many people you're working with. So in this example, we're just going to use this contact ID column as a unique identifier. And then it's super simple to set up. So this is a CSV file, and I've got it right here, contacts.csv. And then all you need to do when you're setting up a scenario in Make is you just need to have some sort of a watch folder in a cloud drive somewhere. So like Google Drive, Box.com, Dropbox. There's probably other ones I'm not thinking of. In this example, we're going to go into my Google Drive here, and I've created a folder here called Drop CSV Files here. And so what you would do is, so I've already got the file dropped in there, but I'm just going to delete this so we can start from scratch. And what you can do is you can have your your staff, or if you have some external app that can dump CSV files into here, whatever way you want to get the file into here, you just drag and drop your CSV file right into your watch folder. And then in Make, this is the scenario that I've set up. It's called Import CSV Files into Airtable. And basically, you could see how simple this is. It's only 5 steps here. You could even technically even make it fewer steps if you're only going to be creating new records. But in this particular example, we're also going to merge data with existing records as well. So basically, you just set up a Google Drive module here to watch files in a folder. And this is going to be watching my drop CSV files here folder. And this one operates on a schedule. So I've got this set to run every day at 9:00 a.m. So it'll look for, the daily CSV file. And then when it finds that file, it will download the file. And then here's where the first part of the magic comes in. You use Make's parse CSV parse CSV module. And the only catch is that it's expecting a certain number of columns, and those columns always have to be in the same order. So it isn't like it reads your CSV file live and figures out the names of all your columns. You actually always have to have a standard CSV file with the same number of columns and in the same order in order to make this work. And so what it'll do is, so I've said that there's 9 columns in this CSV file, and down here, you take the data, which is a binary file. It's a binary raw data file. And you actually have to use Make's function that's called toString. And what that will do is that will change it from binary, which is unreadable. It's not human readable. And it'll take it from that and change it into actual text that is readable. So that's really the trick right here, is you have to convert it into a string of text. But once you do that, then it's very easy, because then you're dealing with just records, just text in Make. And what you could do, if you were only creating new records, you could simply just add a create a record module as the last module here. But I went one step further, and I wanted to show off that Make has this upsert function. So what I do in this is I search using an Airtable formula. I search for each contact ID to see if that person already exists in Airtable. If that person already exists in Airtable, and again, you could search by an email address or whatever unique identifier that you'd like. If that person exists in Airtable, we move on to the upsert function. This function, this module here, does two things. Number one, if that person exists, so if the result of the search actually finds that person, it will simply update that person's information with any new information that was in the CSV file. But if the person doesn't exist, it will actually create them as a brand new record in Airtable. So that is what is so cool about using Make for this, because this one module will either create a new record or it'll update an existing record. And so if we go back to our Airtable table here, you'll see that I've got these 29 contacts here, and I am going to run the scenario right now. And we actually have the same 29 contacts in that CSV file. So right now, it's running the scenario. It's looping through all 29 contacts. It's looking for any changes to the fields, and it'll update them. And it finished. It got all 29. And if we come back into Airtable, you'll see that we still have the same 29 records. So it didn't add any new records. It only updated information that might have been different in here. So that's how you would do that with an import. Are there any questions about the imports?
No, that's great.
If the data is the same, it won't even show a record update, right? Like you won't even see a modification.
That is a great question, and let's check. And you are correct. Look at that. So this was last updated 1 hour ago. So if there's no fields that need updating, it won't even overwrite it. So it won't even get a new updated date.
Right.
Which is really nice, actually.
But if you wanted, like sometimes it's useful to put like a timestamp of the last time it was synced. You could do that from Make, right? You could just timestamp a field.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Let's do that. Should we do that real quick and check it out?
Yeah.
Let's see. So let's say, so I think in this case, we'd probably have to do our own date field.
Yeah.
So let's do that. I'll create a date field here, and let's go into Make here. And now I'm going to go in here, and did it bring up the new one? Oh yeah, already brought it up. Sometimes if it doesn't bring up your new fields, you sometimes have to hit the refresh button up at the top. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a date. So basically another cool thing about Make is you've got all these different functions across the top here. And so I'm going to go into their date functions. I'm going to put in now, and then I'm going to format this the way that I'd like to format it. So I'm going to do the format date function. I'm actually going to put now right here. And then all you need to do is tell it how you want it formatted. And so we'll do m/bb/yyyy. So that, and you probably actually want the time too. So we'll do h:/MMA. This is all documented. I think it's actually identical to Airtable's date formatting as well. And so that looks pretty good. The only thing we need to do is go into Airtable and show the time as well. So I'm going to include the time here. I'm not going to get in the whole time zone thing. That can get a little tricky, so we'll skip that for right now. So I'll just use the same time zone right now, and we'll do date and time. And it's probably going to come in my time zone, actually. So let me just do New York time zone. Okay, cool. So now, because we're actually telling it to put something in every time, it is probably going to update all the records. So let's check and see how this works. So we're going to run this. Oops. And to trigger it, it knows that it already processed the CSV file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a new CSV file here. We're going to keep both files here. And so here's our new one. And now it's going to find the new one. So we're going to run this. And now it's going through all 29. And let's see if it does what we think it's going to do. So we'll wait till it's done with all.
Airtable Automations needs that little pop-up to be able to insert a now.
Oh, yes. I know. Yeah, if you're using Airtable's automations, you have to create your own formula field that equals now, and then reference that formula field.
Yeah, or and do a script step I usually use instead, which is to timestamp. because now is a very expensive formula. Just FYI, it will slow down your base a lot.
Scott, there's a question from No Code Tour. Is that expensive in terms of runs?
Oh yeah, to do this, not very expensive. You can see that each one of this shows you how many runs you've used up. So this is one run, and then here it's 29 plus 29. So up till here, it's just one run each. It's only when it's processing each row of your CSV file when you start getting into higher numbers of runs. But Make, one of the top 10 reasons that I love Make so much is that their pricing is so reasonable that even on their free plan, you get 1,000 runs, 1,000 operations, they call it, per month. So, and then if you go up to $9 a month, you get 10,000 operations in a month. This is so much cheaper than, Zapier, which is their main competitor. So it's really, really affordable. Thank you for telling me there was a question, by the way. And you can see here that now we have the date and time that it was last synced. So you could even change the name of this to last sync time or whatever you want to call it, basically.
Very cool.
And so now I'll show you the reverse. So the reverse is, let's say that at the end of the night, once a day, you just want to export your CSV file out of Airtable so other people can use it. Or other people can have it as a reference, or you send it to that external organization. Well, what's really cool is there's a bunch of different ways to set this up, but one of the easiest and simplest ways to do this is you can just create your own view. So I just called this the nightly 6 p.m. export, and what you can do is you can just filter this view any way you want, and Make will actually pull in all the records from that view. Now, of course, they're doing it using Airtable's API. Airtable's API is what provides this functionality. And so, for example, let's say I just want to see vendors. That's the only thing we need to export every day at 6 p.m. All you have to do is make sure that this view is set properly. And if you don't want people to change it, you could always go in here and just lock the view. And then going back
That's foolproof.
It's 100% foolproof to lock the view. Yeah, no, anyone can unlock it, so be careful with that as well. So then I'm just going to save our changes here. I'm going to go back out to our other scenario here, export CSV files from Airtable. And what we have here is every night at 6 p.m., I've got this searching for records. Now, the real foolproof way to do this would be to create a formula here. This is an Airtable formula. So unless somebody's going to be able to get into your Make account, they're not going to be able to change, what you're searching for in Airtable. So this is the real foolproof way right here. But the easy way is you just leave formula blank and you say, hey, just pull in all the records from this particular view. This will give you a list of all your views here. I guess it's thinking right now. There we go. So we have the grid view, no view at all, and nightly 6 p.m. export. So that's the easier way to set it up if you don't want to worry about creating formulas here. So then you can see how simple the scenario is. You actually have two different options in Make. You have a Create CSV option, and you also have a Create CSV Advanced option. And there is one key difference between these. The normal Create CSV option is much easier to set up. All you do is, I'll actually show you what it looks like. All you do is just check off the fields that you want. So I say, okay, I only need to export the company name, the phone number, the email, and the website. I don't need any of this other information. So it's much, much easier to set up. The only problem is you can't control what order the columns are going to show up in your CSV file. I think it exports the columns in order of field ID in Airtable. I think it alphabetizes them by field ID. I'm not 100% sure. I can't really figure out what order it puts the columns in. So that's the only downside. So the upside is super easy to use, but you can't control the column order. So the more advanced way of doing it is to use their Create CSV Advanced module. Now, what's cool about this is you get to specify your own data structure. And that's actually done from another screen here. I won't go into that too much. You just set up all your fields and you say whether they're text or number. And there's actually some other choices too, like Boolean and stuff like that. And then it lets you actually map them in the order. So you create the data structure in the order that you want. And then all you do is just map in your Airtable fields here. So this just takes a few minutes to set up. But what it'll do is every night at 6 p.m., it'll search for the records that you want. It'll create the CSV file. And then the final step is you just upload that file to your cloud drive. And what I like to do is it asks you, what is the file name of your upload? And I always like to append the file name with the timestamp. So you know when that file was created and it doesn't overwrite any old files if it has the exact same name. So let's just run that real quick. We have 8 people here on this view. And what we are going to do is we're going to go into my drive. We're going to go to this other folder I've created called Retrieve CSV Files here. And now, and you'll see here, I told it to upload to that folder. So now we're going to run this and we'll see what happens. So it's creating the file. In this case, by the way, it only takes one operation to create the CSV file, no matter how many rows you have. So even if you're exporting like 1,000 records, it's only going to take up one operation in Make, which is very cool. And so now we're going to go into my Google Drive. And here's the file. I called it CSV file. And here's the timestamp, July 18th, 2023, 11:45 a.m., which is my local time. And then if I open this up here we go. It's a little bit small. I can't get to the plus sign.
We can see it. We can
okay, you can see it. There we go. Thank you. And here you go. This is in the exact order that I want the CSV file to be in. And we only have 8 records. It says 9 rows because the first row are the field headers. And that's it. And so now you have a nightly dumping of the CSV files that you want. And that is it. It doesn't get much simpler than that, but there's a lot of little nuances and a bunch of little advanced things that you can do to make it really cool.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you, Scott, for sharing that. Very useful. Comes in handy. Okay, let's move on. Camille, Scott, we might save your segment for a future show, just depending on how long we go here. But Camille's going to share us on interfaces and detail pages.
Okay, so just a high-level overview. There's a lot going on. Just want to point out, giving you a precursor. In the old design system, you were able to do things like this. Just keep this screenshot in mind. And then in this thread, there's a lot of frustrations from a lot of different people, and I've included a fairly substantial breakdown of everything that I've noticed. So if I don't mention something here, I've probably already mentioned it in this particular thread, including a lot of detailed screenshots. So just so you know, I think I've covered everything that I could possibly cover. I'm going to go into the interface that I used as an example for what the new detail pages look like. So this is one of them. I'm going to try and cover all of the high points really quickly. One, titles for detail pages are now formalized, meaning you pick a field in the table that marks it as the name of the detail page that you're on, and the title has an area where you can have buttons next to it. Similarly, there are sections that can be applied to a detail page, and for here I'll go into edit mode so that we can see what those look like. As you kind of hover, you can see the difference between 2 different sections that are stacked on top of each other. Something that confuses a lot of people is that the default for sections is column. Most people probably want rows, unless there's specific things, but it seems like most people want to put things next to each other. You do that with the row option. Titles and descriptions are available for each section. For each section, you can turn those off independently of each other. When you turn them back on, they don't get deleted, which is nice. You can also have action buttons applied to an individual section. They will always go next to the title. You can't place them next to fields. That's a major criticism for many people. All of the buttons are basically the same. There's no change to what buttons do. It's just changing where they can go.
Okay.
I'm going to sprinkle in things that I think are positives and things that I think are negative as I go. Major positive for me is I can do this now. I can't tell you how frustrating it was with the old design system of laying things out in a row and then deciding, oh, I need a whole other row, and then your client saying, I want this row to go above the other one. You had to move each individual field one by one. I've wasted hours of my life doing that. It was terrible before. And now I can just do that. I think that's amazing. Now for some negatives. Like I said, a lot of people want to be able to place an action button anywhere. Similarly, the free text element has sort of been replaced with section descriptions. A lot of people had layouts where they put descriptions next to the fields that are relevant. So for some reason, when you include fields, you can include the name of the field. You can rename the field as it's presented here, but you can't include the field's description. Feels like you should be able to do that, and a lot of people circumvented that with text elements and only having them as section descriptions. Many people find that to be insufficient. I'm going to switch this to side sheet really quickly to sort of demonstrate the difference for rows. When you have it in the side sheet orientation, the maximum number of fields you can have next to each other is 3. In full screen, the maximum is 4. This is very consistent. I understand why it's done that. It's clean. If I do that, you can see that things are perfectly responsive. I suspect that's why they made a lot of these changes, because they want them to be visible clearly on mobile. So that's prepped and nice. However, a lot of people, myself included, really want finer control over what the columns are. Sometimes I want only 2 columns. I don't have that choice anymore. It's either 3 or 4, depending on if it's side sheet or full screen. In my latest batch of screenshots, I sort of point out that under the hood, sections are built using CSS grid, meaning you could add under the hood CSS properties, grid column, and grid row spans. It takes, I think, a cumulative total of like 40 characters in CSS to solve a lot of these problems, to have, a long text field, which typically takes up a lot of space, giving us the ability to make this span 2 columns or span 2 rows, or however many that we decide. Simple change that I want there pretty quickly. Something that might be confusing to people, I'm going to get rid of my assign or linked record field and show you the process that you go through in order to show a grid, calendar, etc. Mm-hmm. So you can't just drag a linked record field into its own new section like that. What you have to do is you have to drag it into either a section that already exists or a new section on the sidebar, which is not great, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. You can have a linked record field show as the pills or the cards or any of the sort of standard views as before. If I go back to here, when you have it in any of these orientations, grid, calendar, etc., they become their own section. That's like, it's outside of any of these other field sections. You can't put a grid next to my member count, for instance. That there's good things and bad things about that. one of my problems with these sort of sections is you have no control over how tall a grid or a list view are. I think list is automatically the height of your list. Grid is this arbitrary height that you can't change. Gallery you can change by showing how many different rows there are on the page. I think that's fine, but for whatever reason, you have no control over how tall a grid is. I think that's bad.
Yep.
For these linked record sections, you can have a title. You would rename it how you would rename everything else, but you can't have a description. I think that's also bad. They should be consistent. Something that is very good is that in the newer full page interface pages that we've had for some time now, they came with a couple of different options, including allowing end users to switch how the same data is visualized. Timeline doesn't make sense for this. So your end user will now be able to change how things are presented. It also includes end user filters like drop downs and things like that. All of those got carried over. You can allow people to search, etc. You can also, they've fixed, you can now add new records to a linked record field directly within an interface without having a button that triggers an automation in order to do so. That was the craziest limitation that interfaces had. It's now fixed. You can also link and unlink records. That was another major limitation, because think of things, instances where, like a line item for an invoice, right? I actually have an example for this over here. So, like this person ordered one of these, of this item. If I want to get rid of this, I don't necessarily want to unlink it. I want to delete it because no one else should have that line item. It's specific to this order. However, in this case, I might not want to delete this person. I might just want to unlink them from this campaign. I now have the option to do those. Those are two separate options that you can toggle.
Nice.
In addition to allowing you to edit things inline. So I think, yeah, turning on inline editing allows you to delete, whereas that separate option allows you to unlink. You can add using any of the forms. You can also separately toggle whether you can add someone who's existing or only adding new. That's a good distinction to make. This is why I say there's a lot to like and a lot to dislike. So again, I point out a lot of this stuff in my thread because there's simply a lot to go over. A problem I have noticed that I don't think anyone else has noticed, which frustrates me to no end, for some reason, in the new detail pages, if you add a list view, there's no place to add hierarchies, and that's the entire point of a list view. So I don't know what happened there. I think that's a major limitation that no one else has noticed. Some other limitations, you can't put a chart on a detail page anymore. I think that's major. To me, it makes sense to add chart as a type of visualization from for linked records, because they were always taking in multiple records. It makes sense for it to go there. It's not there yet. I hope they add that very soon. Otherwise, I can't use these for the project I would want to use them for. You can't add arbitrary dividers anymore. They get added automatically in between sections. That I don't necessarily mind. I do wish we had a toggle for whether or not I want this line to be there, and maybe another toggle for how much space to put in between sections. But that's kind of minor stuff. Really quickly, I'm going to show how comments look. Comments, if you're on full screen, take up this sort of right-hand sidebar. I think that's a logical place to put them. I do wish this were collapsible, much like all of like the view sidebar things, the interface navigation sidebar. I want things typically to be collapsible. And if you're in the side sheet orientation, comments appear at the bottom. This really quick. They appear down here, and they kind of expand up, and then you can close them down. That's nice. I like that. You can't do that on full screen. I think they should make it so that you could do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to miss anything major because I know we're running up on time, but those are like the major changes. I'm going to really quickly see if I can explain. I'm about to be kicked out of my conference room as well, so that's fun. What do I want to do? I want to create a new layout. So when you first create a new detail page, this is what it looks like, where it's using the column format for your section. This is what I mentioned earlier, that here are your fields. They are in a section, but you have no way of changing it from column to row, and that's why so many people are confused. If you create a new section, this sort of reveals itself as the section it is, and then you click section 1 to options and change that to row. That's what people are missing because it is very unobvious. So yeah, I'll stop there. And then again, a lot of my thoughts are sort of pointed out in this thread. You are welcome to disagree, but I feel like I want people to get in here and use it because there's a chance they've solved something that has been a frustration for you, and there's a chance they've introduced something that wasn't a frustration for you, and they've added one. For me, it was a mix of both. Some of the changes I really like, and some of them annoy me. So,
Camille, 2 questions. One,
yes.
if you delete that section 2 there, it's still the column 1 will section 1 will remain.
Yes. So you could click directly on a section and hit delete. That's nice. This is still here. Oh no. I feel like yesterday when I tried this, section 1 kind of remained where it is. It's still there.
Still there.
But it's just not, that Airtable, that's bad. That's very confusing for people. Please fix that.
Yeah.
Because then your option, if you only wanted one section and you wanted to go back and change things, you would have to turn everything about that section off just so that you can have these that's so weird. Like, why? Why?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that, Camille? I'm sorry.
I was just saying it's things like that that make this what could have been an awesome update, because again, we're primed and ready for mobile ready interfaces. We can now filter on a detailed page. You can allow end users to switch visualizations, but it's just not there yet. So
it's a little polish. I love that.
A little more polish.
A little more polish. I love that feature you showed earlier where you can now unlink or delete linked records. But I would love they need to bring that to the grid view.
Yes, I would agree. It's things like that where I mentioned earlier, sometimes it feels like they're really listening and sometimes it feels like they're really not. To me, that sounds like they really were listening, because I said, Airtable came to my office like a month ago, and one of the things I said is I need to be able to filter on a detail page, and it's here now. Sometimes people really like the flexibility of the width of fields, and that's gone, and that's the thing that people seem to be most frustrated about.
Next,
so, I'm about to be kicked out of my conference room, so I gotta jet. Those are my thoughts. It's all documented in that thread.
Thank you, Camille.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Camille. Great. Very good. So we'll Scott, we'll get you on another show, and we'll go through the No Loco platform and get some more insights there. So just a quick shout out. We'll end with join our community. We'd love to have you. If you're at all interested in Airtable learning or improving, becoming an expert, all levels are welcome. Join us at BuiltOnAir.com/join. And that will get you into our Slack community, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you all for joining, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for joining today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out our sponsor, ontoair.com, and we will see you next time on the Built on Air podcast.